How's it going? Welcome back, my wise ones, to a fantastic video today. I'm super excited because, yes, I'm Savior. Well, how does it go? I'm generic YouTuber 2026. Because today on the Savior Show, we can actually talk about James Bond, a new James Bond game, and this has been, so long. It has been so long since we got a James Bond game. Now, I grew up on the PlayStation 2 playing this masterpiece. It was called Everything or Nothing. I don't know if anyone remembers this game or has ever played it, but this was such a classic for me, and I just played this over and over again religiously. It also had a banger co-op mode as well. I know a lot of people's James Bond game that they grew up with and what they remember and love is of course GoldenEye, but to me it was Everything or Nothing, and this game was just a classic, just amazing.
You're goddamn right.
So welcome back, my wise ones, and if you're new, do consider subscribing to the channel. Become a wise one today if you love early access reviews, deeper analysis on video games, looking at the themes and philosophy behind the video game and all of that good stuff, and give the video a like. Grab yourself a snack or a beverage and just sit back, get relaxed as we take a look at 007 First Light. I do hope you enjoy this 007 First Light review. This is based on all the early access stuff that we have managed to get our hands on as press, and from all the gameplay and from what I can actually talk about so far. Now, of course, 007 First Light is created by the same people behind the Hitman series, but it's doing things very differently. A lot of people think that this is going to be a 007 game with, kind of Hitman DNA.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But to be honest, this is a very unique game within itself. You have to understand going in that the level design is completely different. It does share some stealth mechanics from Hitman, but what this actually plays like is much more akin to something like Uncharted and Watch Dogs. And you might have heard some of the Watch Dogs comparisons, but honestly, people are underestimating just how much gameplay actually feels like Watch Dogs, but if it was actually good. So I'm going to go into the positives and negatives of this 007 First Light review, so you know exactly what is good about this game, what is bad about the game, and weigh up the pros and cons to see if it's actually worth it for you in the end, instead of some bullshit number that actually means nothing. So you need to understand that this is not an open-ended sandbox game like Hitman, and so many people still think that this is going to play like Hitman, that the level design is like Hitman. It takes some very small inspirations from the Hitman games, but it's nowhere near the complexity that, say, Hitman Blood Money was, or even the newer Hitman games. And I wish there was some kind of reputation-based system in this, so when you do cause damage, when it does go into, the kind of license to kill mode, because if you aren't aware, you can't just whip out your gun and start blasting anyone, as you're not a complete psychopath, you're more of a trained sociopath, so you can't just go around doing whatever the hell you want. It's much more of a story-focused game, similar to Uncharted, but with a few different branching paths that you can take within the levels themselves, how you gather information, stuff like that. That is the Hitman gameplay element to this. But don't be fooled thinking that this is a sandbox game where you can go back and play the level over and over again. There is going to be a mode added later with different objectives, different side things to do, so it does allow for some of that, but it's not, as in-depth as Hitman, okay? With the actual story missions themselves, it's much more of a single goal that you need to chase after, and how you get there is kind of up to you, but it's not so much like Hitman where you need to analyze and study NPC behavior, follow them, learn their routines and all that kind of stuff. There is some of that, but it's not as complex, and that feeds into the stealth gameplay as well. Don't expect to be hiding bodies, covering up, murders or anything like that. It's not that type of experience, sadly. So instead of that complexity, what they have actually added is gadgets, okay? Gadgets and a melee system that is very similar to Sleeping Dogs, if any of you remember that game. Now, Sleeping Dogs was a very overlooked, complicated, like kind of GTA clone back in the day. But what was great about that game was the combat system with hand-to-hand combat, okay? Now, it's not going to be as brutal as this game because it had some pretty crazy finishes, but it definitely took heavy inspiration from this, okay? So how it works with 007 First Light is it's a, normal kind of light attack, heavy attack, and parry, dodge system, but it doesn't have as many interactions as Sleeping Dogs has, but it does still have that grappling-based system, and I do like that. Also, you can pick up things in the environment and use that to your advantage. You can actually, chuck a weapon at someone when you're finished using it and stuff like that. So don't expect the brutality of this game. A lot of people might be comparing the hand-to-hand combat similar to games like Batman Arkham or Mad Max or something like that, but no, to me, this is definitely taking heavy inspiration from Sleeping Dogs.
You're goddamn right.
But of course, this time around, there is an actual gameplay mechanic that kind of comes from the movies to, convert it into a video game. And I really do like that. And that is, of course, the bluff system. So basically, you use your charismatic powers to basically bullshit your way, like every other YouTuber, basically.
Teachers are the custodians of our youth. They are the real heroes. You do nothing. You think you can do what I do? Do it. Nobody can do what I do.
And this can basically get you into areas where you're not supposed to be. And the way you progress this is you actually have to find information within the levels themselves to bullshit correctly. And there is a limited amount of times you can actually do this. And also some enemies are going to be higher level IQ, perhaps subscribers of this channel, perhaps wise ones. That's right. Where they can sniff the bullshit out from you, and basically then you go into the hand-to-hand combat. So it's got that layer of complexity to it as well. And then of course the gadgets, which I'll talk about more later. So that's the main overview of everything you need to know about 007 First Light. Now, in this 007 First Light review, let's talk about the positives and negatives, and then you can decide if it's worth getting early access or not, or waiting for this game to get more content, because what I think is going to happen is it's going to follow that Hitman route of adding DLC, adding more maps later on down the line. And that brings me on to my first positive, which is the level design and the maps, okay? So it's going for that global level design like in Hitman, where you travel around the world and you're always in new locations, and it does that very well. Also, within the level itself, there's many different ways to, find your objective. Like I said, there's ways to kind of eavesdrop on people's conversations, gather information by finding notes or clues around, hacking into someone's phone, using your gadgets and tools to gather that information. So the level designs, from what I have actually seen so far, are pretty big, and they are very vertical most of the time, which is very good. So there's a lot of, movement within that. Lots of ways to sneak around. If you've played any of the modern Hitman games, that is very similar to 007 First Light, but there is a clear objective and a more linear progression point. So it's not like a massive open sandbox where you can just do whatever the hell you want. You do actually need to get to that objective. You can't always backtrack. There are going to be, kind of checkpoints where you have to just progress, as it were. Now, the next positive is just the acting and the cast in this, because this is going for a very cinematic storytelling approach. Of course, it's the classic, another evil agent that you must stop kind of storyline. I can't talk about that really, but there is, quite a generic storyline. Expect there to be twists and turns. There's of course going to be, main chick involved.
This is my wife.
It's James Bond. It's not that complicated, let's be honest, but it's fun, good stuff. And I would say tonally, this is very much, kind of modern James Bond. It's trying to be a little bit more gritty. It does have some of that disconnect that all of these kind of action thrillers, basically playing as complete psychopathic murderers, have, which is why I love Hitman so much, because it just leans into that darker element, especially the older Hitman games like Contracts and Blood Money. Dark stuff, and I love that shit. What can I say? Okay, I'm a man of culture. But in this, you're kind of, a cool guy, a cool a cool, but in this you're a cool psychopath, so it's somehow okay to murder a bunch of people. And it is quite funny because when you do get the license to kill moments in this, because like I said, it has to be triggered, like all of these, you know, generic guards that aren't necessarily evil, now suddenly it's okay to just kill all of them. A lot of the times it makes sense, sometimes, you know, it's just quite funny because even in the movies, it's not that much level of disconnect, but there is that. So if that thing bothers you, then, you know, just be aware. Also, the violence has been turned down a lot. Cutscenes are very well done. Lip syncing, the animations, it all feels like a proper cinematic animated movie. You've got young Dexter playing James Bond, you've got cast members from, you know, like The Walking Dead and stuff like that, so good talent here, delivering good believable voice acting. And if you're missing that kind of linear, you know, just story adventure, you know, a simpler kind of game like we would used to get on the, you know, PS4, PS3 and Xbox, you know, older generations, where it's just kind of a good story, you know, kind of like Indiana Jones or something like that, simple but, you know, effective. It's very much like that type of game where you play through the story, there's a strong narrative, plenty of cutscenes, so it's not the type of game where you need to be figuring out the story for yourself or anything like that. So it's well done, I would say, for the most part, and I really do like this origin story. The best things that makes me so excited to play the full experience, like, you know, I've only seen some of it, is the kind of the origin story, you know, playing those training missions, seeing how James Bond actually became James Bond, all of that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I feel like is a bit of a miss is, you know, when I compare it to the older James Bond games, like they nailed that feeling of actually being like a spy. And modern James Bond doesn't really have that aesthetic anymore of being a spy. It's kind of much more guerrilla warfare, where you're just kind of this random dude who just bullshits his way into everything instead of being like, you know, kind of that Tom Clancy, that older James Bond kind of style that we would get in the older James Bond games. I kind of miss some of that, honestly, but, you know, it's still got plenty of cool gadgets and stuff like that, but you don't feel like a proper, but you don't truly get that agent kind of energy that I kind of miss from the older James Bond stuff. Also, like any James Bond, expect there to be huge amounts of fucking marketing in your face, which is kind of annoying. And, you know, the more older I get, the more I can see behind the corporate bullshit. And yeah, you know, expect there to be a lot of like product placement and stuff like that. But hey, it's a James Bond game, AAA game. What do you expect? And another negative for me is just I do feel that the stealth gameplay has severely been toned down a lot, and it's very disappointing because, you know, this studio, this developer does stealth so well. Like, there are moments where you do impersonate, you know, like people, like pretend to be a journalist and stuff like that, but it doesn't have the full disguise system or anything like that from Hitman. And it's very much, you know, like not worrying about if it's much more about, you know, fast paced completing the objective, and less about covering your tracks, which doesn't make much sense considering that, you know, you are playing as a secret agent. But still, the stealth gameplay is pretty fun, and it heavily utilizes gadgets. That's where the stealth is. It's much more about distraction, instead of, you know, full-on stealth gameplay. And since I am discussing the negatives now, I do just want to say what I really don't like is the system of picking up objects in the world to recharge your poison elements, to recharge your tech, and your abilities and stuff like that. I think this was very fucking stupid, and it makes it feel so video gamey and not in a good way, because it does not make any sense that you need to pick up these objects to recharge, you know, your gadgets or something like that, unless if he's literally doing engineering on the fly or something. And it just makes it feel very gamified, and it's annoying because then you constantly have to be on the lookout for these, you know, things. And it would have just been much better if it was tied to, you know, your performance of, you know, like how you complete objectives, like if you get a bonus, you know, for doing something well, or simply you know, having it on a cooler, but having it as this kind of gimmicky thing that you need to constantly keep on the lookout, like your goddamn Joel from The Last of Us raiding these constant cabinets for endless, you know, shit, where that actually made sense in that game because you would actually take out a backpack, craft stuff. This was a bad choice in my opinion. And again, I think this game would have massively benefited from a system like we saw in the older Hitman games like Blood Money, where, you know, if you mess up on a mission, You actually, you know, see yourself in a newspaper. Slowly, more and more people recognize who you are as you progress throughout the game, and it makes it to actually have weight and consequences. Now, I understand this is trying to capture a more casual audience. That's why the stealth gameplay has been toned down, and all that kind of stuff. But still, that would have made it feel much more like a professional, you know, like secret agent, you know, having your cover blown and stuff like that. But we don't get any of those cool systems in this. It's much more of an Uncharted, you know, kind of experience where you're progressing through a story, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But still, you know, having these amazing developers, you know, working on the Hitman games, not bring in some of those elements, feels like a wasted opportunity, if you ask me.
Goddamn right.
Now, the next positive I want to highlight is just simply the visuals, the graphics, the presentation here is just so well done. Like, the amount of detail that there is, it makes, you know, Hitman kind of look dated in some areas for newer Hitman games. It's very well done, but you do need to be aware that performance is not great, okay? It's not, you know, terrible, and their previous games and IO games are usually well optimized. This one, sadly, is, you know, quite heavy, I would say, and expected to be a little bit choppy at times, but it's not terrible. And this is only from the early access stuff that I have actually seen, that press has got access to, so it might have been a lot better now, I don't know, but it wasn't amazing. And the game is around 25 hours long, okay? I think I can confirm it's around 25 hours long, maybe a little bit longer if you want to take your time, push it. And of course, the mode that they have added where you can go back and play different missions, you know, unlock cosmetics, do, you know, like different challenges, stuff like that. That's going to be where a lot of people sink their time into this game. But as an overall story game, I think that's a perfect length. I don't want a game to drag out too long. It's got enough unique missions, and it does look like you're going to explore a lot of different locations in this game. So yeah, I think that's a good balance overall, but obviously I've only seen some of the early stuff. And the next positive is just the interactions and the physics of it all. It feels much more just physical, and I really love games that just mess around with physics. You know, I'm just very autistic that way, where I love game physics so much, and it just makes me happy to see that. You know, Watch Dogs had cool ideas of, you know, interacting with the environment, you know, triggering things with your gadgets, stuff like that, to kind of lure people and distract people. 007 has all of these cool gadgets, like he has like a sonic boom kind of camera, he has like a pen that can put people to sleep. You know, there's a laser beam that you can use to dismantle, you know, locks and like trap people in actual closets and stuff like that, like trapped in the closet.
I'm nothing. I'm a failure in the eyes of the prophet. Ah!
Hey, Dad! Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet!
And then the final big positive that, of course, I want to end this video on is the combat itself. Now, shooting in Hitman was kind of always, you know, an option, but not necessarily the main thing that you would do. It would be a way to, you know, quickly take out a target and then cover your tracks. Here, when there is an action sequence, you know, it's completely third person, you know, like it turns into a complete third person action game. And I would say that the shooting here does feel very much Uncharted-esque, more so than Watch Dogs or anything else, where it's very snappy, very responsive, you know, changing magazines, swapping weapons, constantly on the lookout for new weapons. So you need to be, you know, kind of constantly taking out enemies, switching weapons. So it's not a kind of cover shooter, it's much more where you need to be constantly like on the move. And it does feel very snappy. You can also enter like a slow down kind of bullet time mode to take out enemies. Some of the enemies do look a bit bullet spongy, like they won't all die from a headshot, so it's not as realistic as Hitman. But in total, I would say the combat is very satisfying for the most part, and this is a story adventure. That is what this game is going for, and it's just good to have another James Bond game back. If you like Watch Dogs, but you want the more linear, good focused experience instead of Ubisoft slop, but you liked what they were going for, and the first Watch Dogs was pretty good in my opinion, then you're gonna like this. If you like the Uncharted games, you're gonna like this. If you like the older James Bond games, you're gonna like this. And if you like the Hitman games, then you're gonna like this. So it's basically mixing all of these ideas together with a little bit of Sleeping Dogs with a little bit of Sleeping Dogs fisticuff gameplay with it all, that it just makes it a very interesting game and a good James Bond game, in my opinion, from what I have seen with the early access. So there you go, my wise ones. That is 007 First Light review, the early access review. I do hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about this game if you're going to be getting it day one, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching, have a blessed day, subscribe if you're new, and peace out.